All right, this is Mrs. Mann, and these are the notes for Utopia versus Dystopia. So, before we can talk about the versus part of the Utopia versus Dystopia, we have to understand what a utopia is and how a dystopia is the opposite. Utopia is a place where everything is fair or seemingly perfect, especially in the laws, the way the government works, and societal practices in general. The word utopia comes from topos, place in Greek. And then there's some debate about where it really comes from for the first part, the prefix eu, eu, or ou, ou. They sound the same. They're pronounced the same. I mispronounced it on purpose so you could see the difference, so to speak. U with an E is Greek for good. So when you put it with topos, it becomes a good place, utopia, which is the intent of a utopian society. U with an OU means no. So when you put it with topos, it becomes no place, or in other words, a place that does not actually exist. And there's arguments for both. But the belief is that this word, which was coined by Sir Thomas More in his book Utopia, meant no place because while the place he described sounded amazing, it was not an actual real life place. So most people, when you hear utopia, say, nope, there's no such thing as utopias. But the intention of a utopia is to be a good place. Next, we're talking about dystopias. The difference between utopia and dystopia really hinges on the prefix that's used, okay? So the two prefixes that could be used for utopia in Greek, for dystopia, it's only one, dys, D-Y-S, which means ill or bad. So a dystopia is a bad place. And typically that means it's a place where everything appears to be fair or perfect, but people are generally unhappy and they tend to live in fear of the government or group that has the power. And a big thing here is that it appears to be fair. But again, there's a government or group that is in power. And so the rest of the people are suffering while this one group has all the good stuff, basically. So at the bottom here, we're going to make a little box Venn diagram because there are similarities in how utopias and dystopias look, and not physical appearance, but just from an outsider's perspective. So that's what we're going to put in the middle, similarities. Okay, so both utopias and dystopias have specific rules or laws that are supposed to create equality among all its citizens. And also, utopias and dystopias have to have everyone who lives in their society follow these rules in order for the society to work. So when it's a utopian society, it has the similarities, specific rules or laws that create the equality, and everyone follows these rules. But the big difference here is in utopias, everyone is actually considered equal and treated as such, and no one person or group has more power than the rest. And also, that means everyone is willingly following these rules. They choose to follow them. The difference is with a dystopia, not everyone is treated fairly or equally, obviously. And the way it usually happens is people get grouped into categories. There's lots of references from popular culture. Divergent comes to mind. And supposedly being grouped this way will create equality, but it never does. And one group or government in this societal grouping has all the power, or they're trying to keep all the power. All right. And then, of course, the other part of it, whereas in Utopia, all the citizens are there willingly and they're agreeing to these expectations of fairness and following all the rules and laws. In dystopias, it's not by choice. The people that live there that aren't in power are forced to behave or follow those laws or suffer serious consequences, which is, again, not a very good thing. So hence the dystopia, ill or bad. For your left side output, I'm actually going to recommend that you think about any stories that you've heard described as dystopian or utopian, or real life instances as well. There are a few of them, including the one from The Powers That Be, that are supposed to be utopias, but maybe they are or are not. So that's why it says story/country on the left side column. And put something there that you're familiar with already. And then you're going to check those three requirements of a utopia or dystopia. Okay, so they all technically have fair laws, but again, you want to really be considering Are those laws truly fair? Is everybody being treated fairly, or is it one group getting all the perks while everybody else suffers? Or it's inequitable amongst different groups. You also want to see or decide, is there an equal power distribution? Does everybody have about the same amount of authority in the society? So like one person can counteract another person's actions justly or fairly. And then finally, are all the citizens, I said happy, but basically are all citizens mostly content? Content and happy are synonyms, but when you think content, that means there's moments of sadness, moments of anger, moments of frustration, but for the most part, there's no major complaints, okay? So pick one, okay? Any story, any movie, any country, society that you're familiar with, and go through the checklist. Are the laws fair to everybody? Is the power equally distributed? Is everyone happy? Okay. So if you look at Hunger Games, which is the example I chose, nope, no fair laws, or the laws are very unfair for a good group of people or a good amount of people. There is not an equal distribution of power in any way, shape, or form. And all the citizens are definitely not happy. So you have a dystopian society. And as such, you can see I labeled it dystopian. And if you list one and it says yes, 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 you have a utopian society. Woohoo! And if there's a mixture of yeses and nos, then that means you just have a society. Okay. And not a specifically utopian or dystopian one. That means it might be problematic, but it's still not specifically a utopian or dystopian society. So I highly recommend that you try this activity on your own. You can copy down the Hunger Games one, that's fine, but I want you to try your own as well for the left side output with something else you're familiar with. So there's a list of movies attached underneath the video in Google Classroom for you to refer to. If you are familiar with any of those stories, by all means, you can use them and then figure out, is it utopian or dystopian?